As a constitutional law attorney, former senior legal advisor and personal counsel to President Donald J. Trump, Jenna Ellis believes in the rule of law and the importance of integrity in our elections. And she's ready to tackle the big cultural and legal issues facing America. This is the Jenna Ellis Show. Here is your host, Jenna Ellis.
Hello, friends, and welcome to another episode of the Jenna Ellis Show. I'm Jenna Ellis, and we do need to be paying attention, as much as I know we all hate it, to the leftist mainstream media. Why? Because that will evidence often what their focal points are, and it will show us very, very clearly what the leftist ideology is trying to promote, especially when conservatives actually go on to some of these mainstream media panels and interviews and sites and actually talk about the truth. So this happened to my guest today, Vince Dow. He actually went on Vice News on their panel and was talking just about, crazy ideas like maybe families should stick together. Maybe we should make sure to follow the laws and not commit crimes. And kids who are raised in traditional nuclear families actually turn out better and ultimately end up having better prospects for their career. Well, the rest of the panel, these leftists, and if you're watching on Rumble, you'll see these, literally purple-haired leftists and their facial expressions. And if you're listening on streaming, go back and subscribe on Rumble as well. Click that subscribe button so that you can download these episodes, but at least watch for yourself this particular clip. And we'll, of course, play the audio as well for those of you who are streaming. And listen to the pushback that Vince Dow, he's 19, he goes on this panel, gets from his fellow, young Gen Zers who cannot possibly believe that he is speaking truth. And before we play this clip, you have to note Vice News is one of those that really caters just to the younger generation. I read it, of course, like I read Huffington Post, I read Washington Post, I read all of the crazy leftist outlets just to see what they're saying. But Vice in particular is so pathetic. I mean, these are on their landing page for Vice News. These are the categories of news, and I put that in air quotes, news that you can read. Politics, all right. Extremism, yes, that is the second header. Politics, extremism, drugs, justice, gender, and investigations. Those are the categories that they think are super important for you as a consumer to read. So listen to Vince Dow and what he says on this panel, and listen and watch especially to the reactions of these leftists. Watch this.
Statistically, it is true that Asians, on average, make more money, in terms of medium, make more money, better test scores, get into better colleges, all that stuff. I think the question is, why is that? And I don't know, model minority, whatever that label wants to mean.
That's actually a myth, because we cannot be...
Well, no, listen. Well, let me finish my point. We need to observe what makes people successful and unsuccessful. And I think when you look at trends that are generally true in the Asian community, not of everyone, but are generally true, usually you have families that are sticking together. You have, people are taught to work hard in school, not get into trouble. I think that translates to why Asians en masse are successful. And I don't think you have to be Asian or white, for that matter, to not have kids out of wedlock, not, commit crime, not cause trouble, or whatever it is. It's just a matter of common sense. That's what makes people successful. And if that's so-called assimilation, having a nuclear family, buying a house, going to school, whatever it is, then yeah, okay, call me a pro-assimilation then.
Legacy Precious Metals is the company that I trust to give you good and patient counsel for investing in your retirement. The Biden administration has caused a financial crisis, and they have no clue how to fix it. Oil prices have skyrocketed, and when oil prices go up, not only do your expenses go up, but the cost of transportation and shipping spikes, leading the prices of goods to rise. And we are already seeing record inflation. That's the last thing that we need. Our economy is in trouble, and you need to take steps to protect yourself. If all your money is tied up in stocks, bonds, and traditional markets, you may be vulnerable. So gold is one of the very best ways to protect your retirement. No matter what happens, you own your own gold. It's real, it's physical, and it's always been valuable since the dawn of time. Call Legacy Precious Metals today at 866-528-1903 or visit them online at legacypminvestment.com. legacypminvestments.com. That's legacypminvestments.com, where you can download the free investor's guide. You can also go to my Facebook page, Jenna Ellis. I am a public figure on Facebook, and I just posted yesterday a really great interview with the president of Legacy Precious Metals, who is discussing why you need to start your retirement account even if you're in your 20s or 30s. There is always a great time to protect your retirement and invest, just like you want to protect your health over the long term. So go to Legacy Precious Metals at legacypminvestments.com or call 866-528-1903. So joining me now is Vince Dow, who is 19. He's a conservative podcaster and YouTuber, and went on Vice News and really just told some very harsh truths. And what I loved about this, Vince, is that the people around you on Vice News, who are clearly maybe the most expressively leftist possible, are debating so poorly and just reject out of hand these very common sense notions that maybe if you have a two-parent household, you might end up with a better job, a better education, a better outlook on life. And so let's talk first, though, about Vice News and how you even got this interview, because it seems like for a place like Vice News that caters to kind of this leftist outrage, they wouldn't even have somebody like you on.
Yeah, well, the thing is that when they do these panels, they have to somewhat try to represent conservative beliefs. Now, you may look at that panel and think, well, he's like one conservative versus everyone. Well, actually, it's supposed to be like three conservatives, and this is what they do. 3 conservatives, 3 moderates, 3 liberals. But the moderates are basically just liberals, right? Because the Vice's idea of what the Overton window is and what constitutes a liberal and a moderate is very skewed. And so that's why we seemed so outnumbered. But yeah, they just reached out to me. It sounded like they were kind of desperate, actually, to get an Asian on that panel, an Asian conservative. And I guess they found me. And I guess they stepped on the wrong minefield, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And, what was also interesting, too, is that as the panel continued and this outrage to just some basic truths that you were espousing, nobody really had a response to this. And I think they were shocked that you were willing to openly say that, maybe in American society, people shouldn't commit crimes. I mean, how dare you? That is so, white supremacist of you. That is just so outrageous. And they didn't have any real arguments. I mean, so to me, it seemed like they weren't really expecting a knowledgeable conservative to come in and actually defend some very basic truths.
Yeah, which is very strange because I went into the panel assuming like this is going to be debate, like we're going to have ideas about things. But I guess when you exist in this frame of mind that they do, they've clearly been very sheltered all their lives. Like, for instance, that one kid, Zayed, the Bangladeshi kid who was always making the faces. This guy is the son of like a billionaire. He's the son of the Citibank CEO. And he's just been doing like this leftist activism stuff, these TED Talks, all his life. And I think he's gone those entire 24, 25 years of his life not actually ever having to confront a conservative or a conservative opinion. And I think that goes for a lot of these people. And so, yeah, you're right. The moment that they came on and were faced with a conservative, I would argue not even saying that conservative of things. I mean, I have opinions that are obviously very conservative, but we never got there because we couldn't get over the mountain of things like, not committing crime is a good thing. Assimilating to a common culture is a good thing. We can never get over this hump. And so, yeah, we were always stuck here trying to argue that. So, and you look at the reaction, too, on their faces. It's just completely dramatic, over the top, ridiculous. And I should point this out, too. These kids, these people, most of them on the panel all graduated from, like, I think one of them was Yale, Columbia, all these different highest institutions in our country. And they cannot handle hearing very basic center-right opinions, right?
Wow. Well, so clearly they're not even debating these ideas or getting any exposure to any basic truths or even, and I would agree with you, these aren't just conservative viewpoints. These are facts that are rooted in statistics, like you mentioned on the panel. And they're clearly not even being confronted with ideas that are outside of the leftist liberal framework in these high-ranking institutions. And so what does this tell you, though, about the perspective of our young people going going to what I would consider indoctrination camps. And I was actually just talking to someone on my radio show earlier this morning saying, when I was in college, which, I graduated in 2007. So, this is a while ago, about 15 years ago. And I went to Colorado State, which of course is, a leftist, more liberal institution. But even back then, it wasn't nearly the same pressure of all of this type of ideology, even though there were emerging viewpoints and aspects of that. Like, I very clearly remember my ethics class and my professor saying on day one, listen, this is not for me to tell you what your ethics should be. This is just for you to understand where you are on the spectrum of ethics. And I'm thinking, what's the point? So for people who are like, oh, great, this class has revealed I have no ethics at all, but good for me. And I'm not going to be convinced otherwise. I mean, it's so ridiculous. The further down the rabbit hole we get, being removed from any morality or social mores that we should be trying to assimilate to. And so for a place like Vice News that gets these graduates from these indoctrination camps, where does it tell you that we are going actually as a society that wants apparently our social mores to be undergirded by relativism?
Yeah, well, I think on the college front, it's a very interesting question that conservatives have to. I don't think there's necessarily a one-size-fits-all solution, because I think in general it is absolutely true. You see the current state of college, and I think there's something to be said about a society where college is only elite because a small portion of people go to college, right? But I would also say that, like, some of us, those of us conservatives who maybe do want to take power and do want to maybe march to the institutions, go into, higher ranking tiers of society, which I think we have to do, right? That's one way we get our ideas back into the sphere, is we have to be the elite. I think for a small portion of people, that's kind of what we have to do. But to answer your question on, I believe it was moral relativism, right? I mean, that is just simply the natural consequence of liberalism, of leftism, of progressivism, right? When you take God out of public life, when you take any idea of objective morality out of public life, you end up at this point. Although, I would argue that we're kind of at this 3-point stage, right? And I say this, we say, because liberalism, individualism, I should say, originated kind of as a liberal concept, but now you see the left is, very collectivist, very tribalistic. I don't even think it's necessarily that the left is morally relativist. More so than that, they use moral relativism to kind of break us free, quote unquote, from the old school, traditional Western ideas of morality. And so they say, hey, ethics are subjective. But you notice once they kind of get in everyone's head that ethics are subjective, then they start pushing actually their own ethics and their own morality, or immorality, if you want to call it that. And like I said earlier, they did this with individualism. The Enlightenment, they come around, they talk about, individualism, and then we're taught that's what liberalism is all about. And then the moment that they kind of use individualism to maybe liberate people, quote unquote, away from old social norms, old social mores, they start pushing the new ones. And so I think that's kind of the 3-point stage that we're on here right now.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely correct. And we're seeing that with this rise of, the new elites and the new expert class, because once people break away from the traditional values and into this post-truth kind of society of moral relativism, now, though, it's not just, well, whatever is your truth, then you're allowed to express that in the public square, because clearly we're seeing certain ideologies that they don't want represented, like Christianity, like any sort of, traditional Western ideas of fundamental truths. Those are, and God in society, that's being completely excised. Now we have to look to the so-called experts, whether that's in academia, it's in the science, or it's in philosophy, or whoever they establish as the expert class, then have to tell us how we should live our lives. And this is why we're seeing the rise of not only with, health science, with all of these things, with gender transition and so-called gender affirming care of children, where, you have to trust the social worker, and you have to trust the teacher in schools, these people that they have put up as the experts that are over and above what is in the best interest of children, rather than their own parents. Because you as an individual of course, can't determine for yourself and for your children what's in your best interest. And you can't look at reality and commonly observe that maybe gender mutilation of your children is a bad thing. You have to trust the so-called experts. So I agree with you that we are rapidly going not just from a post-truth society, but even a post-relativistic society into complete demoralization of this type of more totalitarian and genuinely fascist regime. And so, but bringing this back to your vice panel, it was interesting to me when you talk about assimilation into culture, the immediate pushback from your fellow panelists was, oh, this is erasure. And, I don't even think they know what that term means. But, when we're talking about assimilation to a culture and its customs and mores, where do we get in that conversation, and where did you want to go with this conversation when you're talking about the traditional Western Judeo-Christian values that our country was genuinely founded on?
So, if you'll remember, I didn't propose anything all that specific because, frankly, I think it's a kind of complicated question, right? America is, a increasingly diverse country, et cetera. How do we kind of put this all together? How do we make this all fit into one puzzle piece? And so I just brought up a very basic social principle. I said that, in order for a society to function and to unite, then we have to have things that we unite upon, right? They just absolutely melted down, not even being able to, I guess, comprehend this very basic point. Now, to answer your question, I don't think it's necessarily, and I wanted to hopefully take the discussion to this point, but we never got there. I don't think it's as easy as simply saying, well, every immigrant who comes over assimilate to current American culture too, because American culture, if you've seen the state of American culture, is Hollywood, it is New York City, it is Silicon Valley. And, do we want every person who comes into this country and every kid who grows up to assimilate into that culture? Or do we want to assimilate them into kind of the older American culture of old, right? And so I think if we're to add more layers of complexity to this conversation, I would say that in many ways, we need a pause. We need a shutdown on, mass immigration coming into our country. We need an immigration moratorium per se, for a number of reasons. I think you look at, the amount of immigration we've had since the 60s and all that, and can we balance all this, but in a very basic kind of culture warrior sense, I think in many ways we need to pause new people coming into our country until we can fix the current state of our country. Because what the Democrats and the left are currently doing is importing a bunch of people into our country through both legal means and illegal means. And what's the result? So either they don't assimilate, which is bad because we just have a dysfunctional, disjointed, disunited society. Not assimilating is bad. But when they do assimilate, a lot of times, most of the times, they're not assimilating to the America of Ronald Reagan or the America of the 50s or whatever. They're assimilating to Hollywood. They're assimilating to Sam Smith wearing the gigantic balloon. Like that's assimilation. And so we can't have that either. And so that's kind of where I would take the conversation if I was not arguing with 4-year-olds, right?
Right. And, that's a really interesting point that, if we look at American culture today, I mean, assimilation, what are they really assimilating to today, and how do we describe our American identity? And I think that this type of identity crisis, in terms of what does constitute our common values and our common understanding of right versus wrong, good versus evil, purpose of government, some of these very, very basic questions that we asked and answered at our founding have been lost even since the Reagan era. And there was a revival somewhat, at least within the GOP base, if I can put it that way, with President Trump, because he brought back these ideas. And of course, he was called the racist, white supremacist, blah, 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 just simply for saying that we need to bring God back into public schools, into the public square. We need to have a moratorium on things like abortion, for example. We need to all understand that every human being has inherent dignity and worth. I mean, just some of these very basic concepts. And so from your perspective, how would this look if we take a pause basically and say, we need to get back to understanding what is our national identity? What is our common creed? What do we all understand and believe as Americans when we have so diversified our beliefs in this very pluralistic society? I'm not sure we can all come back together.
I share your concern, right? I like you. I'm not sure we entirely can all come back together. I think the best angle we could do on those ends is that, maybe hopefully we promote what is in general a more conservative culture, right? And so I think if there were something along the lines of a religious revival, specifically, you look at kind of the periods of great awakenings, Christian revivals throughout American history, you could say America probably needs one. I think a lot of people in America need one. And, on other ends, perhaps the sort of idea of the American dream, the idea of like the traditional American family, kind of rooting that more into our cultural norms, speaking English, which, used to be a relative non-starter, but nowadays, I mean, we're getting to the point where, a lot of Americans can't even speak English, things like that. And so
you're going to go viral for just saying that, because how dare you? We need to make sure, because English is not, it's not the national language. And so how dare you take away the rich culture and history of people who still want to identify as hyphenated? Because, and only in this culture, only in America do we have, something hyphen American. It's like, why can't we all just be American?
Right. Right, but like I said, it is truthfully a very difficult question. You have a bunch of people who, like I said on the panel, like diversity is not our strength. You have a country of people who increasingly share very little in common, and non-starters might be okay. We can all agree on, like, let's say, and people say this a lot, like the American system of government, Constitution, founding values, all that stuff. But even then, I would say, like, keep this in mind, right? When those things were created, when the Declaration and whatnot were written, there was also like a common culture and common beliefs outside of that stuff too. And so I would even say that just agreeing on kind of the concept of like American government and civic nationalism, that really still doesn't unite a country, right? Because we might agree that, okay, we both vote and do this and that, free speech, and that's better than nothing. It's better than what we have now. But then I would even say, okay, but then what is our culture still? Well, we can't even communicate with each other. And so it's a lot. Like I said, I don't know if I have the easiest answer. I don't think there is the easiest answer, but I think we have to kind of work towards what we assume would be the ideal solution and see how close we can get to that, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think even if it's going to take a long time and maybe even a couple of generations away from getting back to the roots of the Judeo-Christian worldview that we were founded upon, we still need to make those strides now. And we need to, as a wider conservative and hopefully Christian swath of voters and of Americans, we need to be just as loud, if not louder, as the left. If they're pushing all of their viewpoints and ideologies and worldviews through every available platform, like Vice, for example, which, is a lot geared a lot toward younger people. I mean, I don't know of anyone really, unless they're like super newsy, junky politicos, that even know what Vice is, but a lot of young people do. And, the same thing with a lot of these streaming platforms, a lot of things like TikTok and Snapchat, all of these things that are geared toward young people. Conservatives need to be taking those same platforms and pushing out content that is geared toward truly informing and educating and persuading, not just, from behind a podium. I mean, I go to so many conferences that are geared toward, kind of the upper age group really of Republicans that are frankly so boring. And I'm thinking, okay, so I'm going to sit here and listen to this because this is what conservatism generally is. But then you have the leftists, they're using entertainment. They're using the platform of the Grammys, on television to promote their heinous ideology. So I think that as conservatives, we need to do better at using the tools available truly to reach, especially the next generation, through the means that the left uses. Otherwise, I think we're just continuing to spin our wheels, and we may not persuade people until they're, 40, 50 plus. And then we've lost an entire generation of voters, which is also why you're seeing a lot of the Democrats get that millennial and younger voting bloc.
Well, that's interesting you bring that up because I think what you notice right now with a lot of people, and I see this in my personal life, 40, 50 years old, reaching middle age, past middle age, are starting to look at, the wokeness and the left gone too far. And I've seen a lot of Democrats now becoming independents, becoming even Republicans in many cases. And conservatives might look at something like that and think, okay, well, we've got it now. They've pushed too far, right? This is our moment to retake everything. But then what's happening to the younger generations, right? These young kids are coming out of college being taught way more radical things than Gen X was, the boomers were, et cetera. And the conditioning is like 10 times stronger. And so you wonder who is pushing all of these very crazy ideas in our culture. It's the young people. Now, for now, the young people, your voting age is 18, but usually people don't start to really vote en masse until late 20s, 30s, 40s, stuff like that. For now, maybe, your kind of suburban moderates outnumber these crazies that are coming out of the universities, but the math doesn't lie. I mean, time will, not be in our favor on that front. And so I think you're right. We have to really start fighting for the youth now. And then, many people say, oh, well, they're going to grow up once they enter the corporate world and the real world and they have a job. Well, is that really the case? Because look at the corporate world. Is the corporate world giving them a reality check, or is it actually bending the knee to them? So,
yeah, well, Silicon Valley for sure. I mean, when you look at even what Elon Musk has exposed about what was going on in corporate Twitter, I mean, it's just absurd. And so for all of these leftists then who are going through college and I remember, and again, when I was in college, when this was first kind of starting to trend, toward more of the woke relativistic sort of ideology that was being perpetuated in colleges in mass. Then, I remember a lot of my parents' age group saying, well, as soon as kids, get to the real world, they're going to be in for a rude awakening. Well, all that my generation did was change the corporate environment and demand that it was catered to their feelings. And so I think the same thing is going to end up happening to the voting bloc, that they're not just going to wake up one day and say, wow, I'm going to decide to be a capitalist because I have property taxes now. I have 2.5 kids. I have, all of these other responsibilities, especially because, my age group, and I'm an older millennial. It's my age group, but my age group and down into your age group as well, are getting married later in life. Some are choosing to not get married at all. You have, people like Seth Rogen and his wife saying, we are so much happier with our choice to not have children because we can go and do whatever we want. And so it's like this perpetual delay of genuine adulthood and the perpetuation of the child. And a child needs parents. And so what we've done in society is created this perpetual adult child that is reliant on the parent of government. And we're starting to see that in policy, in the corporate world, and really prolifically throughout policy, that these woke leftists want to be catered to by our system of government. And so I think what you're saying, Vince, is really insightful, because we need to kind of press a pause button and say, we need to come back and understand what truly defines us as Americans. And we as conservatives need to be the culture warriors in every aspect of life, in the corporate world, in the church, in the family, in our own lives, not just in the government. Of course, we need to be pushing good conservative policy, but we can't, as conservatives, look to the government to solve all of the problems that have been perpetuated over the last, 40, 50 plus years. Well, we need to do a much better job as a conservative movement to reaching young people and, doing all of the things that the left does, but better, because our ideas have merit, but we can't just assume that people will sit down and actually listen to the full conversation, as your vice panel very clearly evidenced. I mean, you don't even get to the merit of the conversation if these people are already so indoctrinated and so antagonistic against any even moderately conservative idea. So I think you're right. But Vince, I really appreciate your comments today. And I'm really glad that places like Vice will have people like you, and that you're willing to kind of go into those forums and speak truth, because that's shocking, I think, to people who watch that. And, I was saying earlier on in the opening to this program, I mean, Vice, if you just look at their headlines and you look at how, they're trending, they have an entire category that's called extremism, where you can go and read the news that's evidencing, extremism. I mean, it just tells you what they think is news. And so I'm grateful for people like you. Keep it up, keep up the good work, and hope to talk to you again very soon. Thanks. Well, friends, you must start taking care of your liver now more than ever. Why? Well, because the latest data from the American Heart Association indicates that adults with fatty liver were 3.5 times more likely to have heart failure than those without. The American Liver Foundation says that 100 million Americans have fatty liver, which means many people are still at risk. We throw everything at our livers: cholesterol, alcohol, toxins, Tylenol, statins, cigarettes, you name it. That's why so many of us have a sluggish, fatty liver that makes us gain weight and lose energy. For decades now, your liver has helped you with over 500 key functions every day. So it's time to help your liver and give back. Here's the solution: Liver Health Formula, an all-natural supplement which contains 12 clinically proven biobotanicals that help recharge and protect your liver. Manufactured right here in the USA and approved by American doctors. You can try Liver Health Formula and receive 5 free gifts when you order today. First, you'll receive a free bottle of nano-powered omega-3 to keep your heart healthy. You will also get 4 free ebooks to support every aspect of your health. So try Liver Health Formula today by going to getliverhelp.com/Jenna and claim your 5 free bonus gifts. So that's getliverhelp.com/JENNA. Legacy Precious Metals is the company that I trust to give you good and patient counsel for investing in your retirement. The Biden administration has caused a financial crisis and they have no clue how to fix it. Oil prices have skyrocketed, and when oil prices go up, not only do your expenses go up, but the cost of transportation and shipping spikes, leading the prices of goods to rise. And we are already seeing record inflation. That's the last thing that we need. Our economy is in trouble and you need to take steps to protect yourself. If all your money is tied up in stocks, bonds, and traditional markets, you may be vulnerable. So gold is one of the very best ways to protect your retirement. No matter what happens, you own your own gold. It's real, it's physical, and it's always been valuable since the dawn of time. Call Legacy Precious Metals today at 866-528-1903 or visit them online at legacypminvestments.com. That's legacypminvestments.com, where you can download the free investor's guide. You can also go to my Facebook page, Jenna Ellis. I am a public figure on Facebook. You need to start your retirement account even if you're in your 20s or 30s. There is always a great time to protect your retirement and invest, just like you want to protect your health over the long term. So go to Legacy Precious Metals at legacypminvestments.com or call 866-528-1903.